it's Leela, the proud Poly Kinky Queer Slut. Today's question is fairly lengthy. I'm going to read it to you verbatim, and it's about renegotiating my marriage from monogamy to polyamory. So the question is, I'm curious what it was like for you and your wife to renegotiate your monogamous marriage. Was it a fairly smooth transition, or were there uh-ohs? Are we going to get divorced? Moments along the way. What helped you two decide to work through it together, and how did you feel safe and connected while navigating the shift? For folks who are in that in-between space with their partners right now, wondering if they can grow together or if this is where their paths split, what advice, resources, or reassurances would you share? So I love this question, super detailed. This is probably going to be a bit of a lengthy little episode. So first, I'm going to take this in pieces, kind of in the order it is in the question, because it's a very well formulated question, I think. Was it all a smooth transition? No, it was not. It definitely was not. So I've been very open forever about just wanting a world where I could have sex with all of my friends. But for a long time, we didn't really think that was a possibility, and certainly my spouse did not think so. So for those of you who do not know, my spouse is monogamously inclined, and our relationship is a mono-poly relationship right now. They certainly have all the freedom to do whatever they want, but for them, that means occasionally kissing somebody and going dancing a lot. So it's not the same kind of thing as my needs. So I wish that I could say that I was assertive about what I needed and went, approached my partner asking for what I wanted in a way that respected everybody's feelings, but that's just not how it went down. What happened in actual practice was that I'd had make-out buddies and casual friends that I would flirt with, and that was fine. My spouse knew about that. My spouse was comfortable with that. But one night during COVID, we had a friend over for a backyard party where there was liquor, and there hadn't been liquor for a while. And I drank a ton of scotch and fucked my friend in the backyard. And the next morning, I did not remember much at all, like a few details. But the next morning, I'm messaging with my friend and lying in bed with my spouse going like, hey, why are my knees covered in grass? And found out that way that I had effectively slept with somebody when I wasn't supposed to. So that to me was like, oh, oops, I made a mistake. That was way too much alcohol. And that was the big problem for me, was that I don't dislike drinking to excess. And that was not a step I wanted to take accidentally. But for my spouse, it was crushing. They felt betrayed. They felt like I had hurt them, really injured them in some way. And then that reaction from them made me mad, because it made me feel like they were trying to own and control my body in a way that I never had felt from them before. Like they were vilifying me in a way that I just had this visceral reaction of hatred for that. And that was a moment where really I thought that it might be divorce. That no matter how much you love each other, no matter how much you want to be together, sometimes there are just values that don't match. So what we did is, it was hard. That was one of the hardest weeks in my life. And frankly, made more complicated by some other things, like confided in a good friend who then kissed me. And so, my brain was just spinning. It really was. But what was becoming clear was that I could no longer live in the box that I was being kept in. And it felt that way. It felt like I was being kept in a box. So we got a therapist. We got a couples therapist. I actually asked my therapist, who I'd been working with for a very long time on my PTSD issues, to refer somebody. And she did. She sent us to this very good couples therapist. And I specifically asked for somebody who was fluent in issues of queer culture, because my spouse is transgender and was in that coming out process. And I thought that in order to understand my family and my situation, it would have to be somebody who didn't get hung up on that portion of what we were going through. So we sat down with this therapist. We told our story. We went through our history. It was a lengthy session, a 2-hour session. And the first hour and a half of it was really him asking us a bunch of detailed questions about ourselves, about our life, about our values, about what we wanted. And then at the end of that session, that last half hour of that session, he laid it out for me, and no one had done this for me like this. And I was very, very grateful for it. He said, Leela, you are polyamorous. It is an orientation, and that's not something that's going to change. And that was just eye-opening because it told me there wasn't anything wrong with me. It was an authority figure telling me that I am not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. This is a way that I am built. This is the way that I am. And that just resonated as so true that it hit me. And my spouse heard that. And heard all the things that I was saying about all of my feelings in that process too. And then, that same therapist turned to my spouse and gave them some hard words about needing to work on their shame. Because what came out in that session is that they were not trying to allow their sexual shame to control me, but that's what was happening in practice. And that was it was eye-opening. So within a few days of that first session, there was a choice. There was a choice made that we were going to move towards opening our relationship because, we had the backdrop going of my spouse coming out as trans and being herself out in public a lot more, and my supporting that 100%, and the understanding that things have to change sometimes, and that's scary and vulnerable, but it needs to happen. So that's what we started to do. So now we get into some of the advice. So people will tell you take it slow. And I think there is some value in that. However, we decided on the opposite. So for us, I was trying to be extra cautious of my partner's feelings, basically continuing to hold myself back for the sake of them, and trying to come up with like safe ways to explore and kind of tiptoeing in. Before long, we got to a point where she just said, you know what? I want to get to the end state as fast as possible. This transition state, this wondering what's coming next, that's so hard. So how can we get to the end state? And so that's what I started working towards, is just making choices without taking her into account, without making her feelings primary. And that was definitely hard. It definitely took a long time to do that. But it was definitely also valuable to do that. Because it helped me learn one of those first core lessons of polyamory, which is, making yourself and your relationship with yourself a primary relationship. Your primary relationship is your relationship with yourself. And it really helped me to do that in a really big way. But along that path, there were also some really big challenges. So there were nights when I would go out and do my thing and, come home and want to tell my spouse all about it. But they might have had a few drinks. And there were a few nights where they'd had more than a few drinks. And what I got was, "You're ripping my heart out!" Just like in my face rage about what I was doing. To which I, walked away and then came back the next day and say, "Hey, do you even remember what you said to me last night?" And then we implemented a rule that we just weren't going to talk to each other when I came home from my dates. That was just, we would talk the next day. Because they were working through emotions. They were working through big emotions. Lots of jealousy, lots of feelings of insecurity, lots of their own feelings of shame that I could not help with, but they had to help with. They were continuing some sessions with the therapist. We both were, but they had some individual sessions as well. Really working on these issues because we intellectually understood where we wanted to get, and my spouse especially intellectually understood where they wanted to be, but they had to really look at all those feelings in order to get there. So it was complicated, and it was a bit tricky to get there, and that was, I would say, kind of phase one of opening our relationship. Was there were lots of contentious emotions. We had our goal. We knew we were going. And it was a matter of trying to get there together. And there was a lot of trial and error. And I would say the advice out of that is just set boundaries that work for you. And as you run into problems, talk about them. And then set boundaries that address them, that give you each the room to be your own unique individuals and to grow that way. So one important part of this question is it asks, how do you feel safe and connected while navigating the shift? that was a really important thing that I think that my spouse and I had a bit of a head start on because of our long relationship, but also because of the core values we had in our marriage. So from the beginning, our marriage was not a commitment to be with each other till we die. I mean, it's understood we're going to be together till we die, but not because we have to, because we both choose to. And throughout the course of our marriage, we made an effort to stay connected, to stay best friends, to stay lovers, to really maintain that sense that every day I'm choosing to be with you. Every day I could choose to leave, but every day I am choosing to stay. And because I want to be with you, even on the hard days, even on the hardest days, I still am making the choice to stay and to be here with you because I love you and want to be. And that foundation of, not having that strong commitment, especially helped me through those tough periods because I reevaluated at every point what my choices were. I will say that also that moment of contemplating divorce helped me a lot because it made me realize that I was going to be okay. This is the relationship that gave me family when I came out of dysfunctional family and gave me a sense of security and belonging. And to realize that I would be okay without my spouse was a big step in making me feel safe, leaning into and tolerating their insecurities, because I felt like it would suck and I don't ever want to be without my spouse, but it wouldn't kill me and I would be fine. And that there are some things that are more important to me than being with this one person. And so that helped me to put together what I needed our relationship to be in order for it to go forward for me. But that also allowed us to have a lot of communication. We had that background of communicating about what we actually want and operating based on what I want and what you want rather than what my role is and what your role is. So being honest and transparent about really everything, I think, is key. So you don't have to tell your spouse everything. And this is another one of those things that we learned. At first, I was like, oh, here's all the exciting sex I just had with this other person. Let me tell you every gritty detail. And that made my spouse feel horrible. And then finally, it's just like, I don't want to know. Don't tell me. And then things got a lot better. But we were able to have that communication about no, don't tell me, because we were used to having honest communications, not about what we're supposed to do, but what we actually want. And one way you can really stay closer to each other and connected is by practicing having those conversations. So there are tools. There are so many tools. And I mentioned Multiamory, the podcast on this little channel a lot, but they really are great. What they do is wonderful. And if you like to consume information by listening to it and in podcast form, highly, highly recommend. There are also just a whole lot of books out there about opening your relationship. Doing the work of studying about this really does help. And not just about polyamory, but about effective communication and about how to manage and maintain good relationships. Another tool that I would recommend for just maintaining that closeness is take the time. This was particularly challenging before opening up our relationship when just having kids, because when you have kids, you don't have as much time together. But scheduling dates with your spouse and recognizing that time together spent taking care of the kids, managing the house, doing chores is not date time. It's not fun time. So you have to have the fun time in addition to that, in addition to the time where you're taking care of your responsibilities. So plan that in. I highly recommend actual relationship check-ins where you set aside time where you're specifically going to talk about your relationship. And the reason for that is that there are plenty of things that we talk about on a daily basis back and forth with our partner that clutter things up, that get in the way. That if you have to talk about everything right when it comes up, well, maybe there's not time, or maybe we're emotionally activated, and those things either get put aside and not brought back up, or they become a big issue in the moment because of a lot of other factors going on, like stress about life and work and kids. Whereas if you put a pin in them and just keep a list, and multi-amory folks recommend this whole like check-in rubric. What I do is actually a little bit more just straightforward. It's setting aside time, and by time I mean hours. 3 to 4 hours is good. at least 2 hours. But where you start by coming together, you start by, deep breath, let off whatever stresses you've got to talk about. Careful not to make it a planning meeting for the household, but, space to arrive, to settle. If you have little rituals that you do that help you feel more comfortable, or places that make you feel more romantic, it's a good idea to utilize those tools. But just take time to arrive, and then get into your lists and make it a point to talk about the hard stuff. This is the time to talk about the hard stuff. And if somebody gets emotionally activated about it, give them that space to calm down. Maybe they need to step away and come back. But make that a safe space for those conversations. And you're not going to resolve everything in that. But by having that time set aside, you can contain those discussions to that space instead of having that be energy that affects all the rest of everything. But you can also more productively work towards that situation. There was also, moving on to the next tool, there was a great thing that my therapist said, which was that, remember, neither of you is doing this to the other one. This is a situation you find yourself in together. So, Leela, you're not hurting him. He's not hurting you. You're finding yourself in this situation together. It's a no-fault situation where there doesn't have to be a bad guy. And that mentality really allows you to work together to solve the problem and to solve whatever problems come up. So going back, taking that example of I was coming home from my dates, all excited. My spouse had been coping with that, but with the jealousy by drinking too much while I was out. And that was resulting in us being getting in arguments when I would get home. We were able to talk about that, and I was able to say, hey, this is not working for me. And it was like, wow, that's not working for me either, says my spouse. And it was not working. So we were able to say, okay, that's not working. How can we rework this to be something that does work? And we did. And we put in the boundaries that worked. He started practicing other techniques for dealing with his jealousy. And frankly, dealing with distracting and going to bed early and self-care things when I was out doing my self-care of dating. And then also that not talking after dates, that was really, really critical. But that was one of those things that felt really, really unnatural until we actually talked about it. Also, trust your spouse to take care of themselves, and trust yourself to take care of yourself, because that's really important. You gotta put yourself first and be selfish. And if you aren't selfish, then you won't have the room to take care of other people. And it's really, really key to take care of yourself first. So now I want to tell you where we've ended up, fast forwarding to several years later. It's been a while now, 4 years, I think. We are in this beautiful place. It really is awesome. And I am really happy to be able to present a positive example of a couple that has gone from monogamy to polyamory in a successful way. So now we're at a point where my spouse absolutely still gets jealous sometimes, especially about romantic partners, especially when they think my judgment's not great. Those things are still hard. And I get jealous over weird things, for sure. But we still have all these feelings, but we now have established practices where we each manage our own feelings a lot more without putting so much of that work on each other. And also where those feelings, we have other emotional supports that help us. Frankly, I think this has helped our long-term marriage be more successful because we were both feeling a lot of that pressure from being each other's really only emotional support for the first, 15 plus years of our marriage. We've got more autonomous lives now. But I will say that when we spend time together, it's exciting and beautiful. And I really, really enjoy every single moment with my spouse. And it feels like falling in love all over again. Because there are a lot of things that I was, just kind of going with. That now I'm just like, no, you know what? I don't like pop music. or punk for that matter. either of those. But I'm more honest about these things. And my spouse also has had their own growth and learning. And we've been freed up to grow in our own ways that are different from each other. And that is beautiful. It makes us more interesting to each other to have those differences. Also, we're at a point right now where my spouse absolutely can hang out and spend time with my lovers and feel comfortable. And they are family friends. Not all of them, obviously, but like the ones that are legitimate friends. And, for example, one of the people who is one of my friends and lovers is going to a concert, a music festival with my spouse in the coming months, because they are both very much into the same bands and I'm not. And even though my spouse is choosing to not have sexual relationships with a lot of people, our lives are very much more enriched by having more people in them now. And those tools of communication that we put together as part of opening our relationship, those have really served us well and continue to serve us well. It's also really helped us to have concepts entering our world from all of this polyamory education that are things like sexuality doesn't need to be the center of our relationship just because we're married. So if our sexual compatibility is not exactly what the ideal is for a marriage, that's okay. It can be whatever it works for us. And it doesn't have to be what other people say it should be. And those examples have all been really, really great for us. So we are super happy now, and we are super, functional in our relationship and our parenting, very much in love. I would not call us one of those best friend marriages. We are very much still in love with each other and looking forward to being together for the foreseeable future, rest of our lives, presumably, provided that still works for us on an ongoing basis. But honestly, can't imagine my life without her, without my wife. So yeah, there are happy endings, and there are plenty of examples of them. And you have to design what works for you and really explore and find what works for you and then make it. But it absolutely can be done, and it can be done without too much heartache and strain. You do have to hang into the hard times, and you have to really be committed to yourself, to putting yourself first, and taking care of your needs first. And so finally, I want to talk about this idea of, do we split up or do we stay together? There's so much emotional investment in a partner that you might have kids with, that is a long-term partner, that is a monogamous partner. So much emotion invested in that. And it's very easy to get stuck in the sunk cost fallacy. Like, I've spent so much of my life and time with this person that it would be a shame to give up on that investment. And this comes into play with business decision making. I actually learned about it when I got my MBA. Yeah, you don't make decisions in business based on what you've already spent, because that money, that time, those emotional energy, that resources that you've already spent, that's in the past. That's gone. You can't get it back. You make decisions based on what's your opportunity cost, what's your future, what are you looking forward to, what is your now and what is your future, and discounting, disregarding, throwing away everything in the past. Again, this is economics, but I really think it applies here as well. And there are some important things to keep in mind when you're making that decision. Like, from that standpoint of having trashed the past, past doesn't count. Starting here and now, making that decision. The first thing is, there is no wrong decision. There is no unethical decision. There is no decision that makes anybody a bad guy. No one has to be evil. There is no decision that you can make at this point that would be the wrong decision, empirically. There are choices with different paths. And I firmly believe that many, 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 many beautiful, successful, relationships that have been fulfilling for people in hugely meaningful ways. Many, 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 many of those. As a matter of fact, way more of those than result in long-term, lifelong monogamy are wonderful while they last, but do have a sunset period and should end for the good of the people in the relationship. If the relationship is not in the best interest of both people in it now, right now, and moving forward, then that relationship should end. And it hurts and it sucks and it's horrible, but it's the right choice for you if what that relationship is not serving you. And either person in that relationship needs to be serving both people now. And if that relationship is not serving both people well now, then it needs to change your end. And a lot of times that's hard. I don't know, I'm putting out the words, but it's harder said than done. But I do think that's important. And it's also important because the secret to a good transition with this stuff, and really I think the secret to happiness in a long-term monogamous long-term relationship, is being comfortable letting it go if that's the right choice. Because then you know why you're together. You know why you're making the choice. Every day I wake up and I know that I'm with my spouse because I love them, and that they're with me because they love me, and that we're together because being together serves us each. And that feels like love to me. I don't have to ever wake up and wonder if my spouse is here because they have to be. And so there's no wrong choice. Also, our society will tell you that there are lots of ethical problems with being divorced parents. That is bullshit. That is BS. Like, you can absolutely be a good parent, functional friends, and raise kids as divorced parents. So your kids will be best off in whatever situation produces the happiest, most stable parents. So keeping that in mind, of course, consider your children. But wad up and throw away that idea that what's best for your children is for you to stay in an unhappy situation. Because what's best for your children is to see parents who are empowered and working for themselves to do what they feel is best for themselves and for the world. That is what's best for kids. Happy parents make happy kids. Now, of course, if that's your situation, you're going to have to communicate a lot with each other about how you maintain that stability and co-parent. But millions of people are doing this well. So plenty of resources about that. And I don't say that because I think people should break up. I don't. I do think a lot of times you can save the relationship, and saving the relationship or maintaining the relationship is what's best for the people involved. But I think it's counterproductive to save the relationship for its own sake. And I think that can get in the way and be too much pressure on somebody who's trying to figure these things out. Another piece of advice with this that is related to this whole question of stay or go. Jealousy is okay. Jealousy is a natural human emotion. And you really need to lean into that feeling if you're doing this transition, and become friends with it. Become friends with your jealousy. Jealousy is the best gift that my emotions have ever given me. And it's because it teaches me. It's such an instructive emotion. Multi-Amory has all sorts of great episodes about jealousy and envy. So highly recommend checking that out. There's also a lot of good books about that, just Googling around. But I will tell you that every single time I get jealous, it's because there's something I want that I'm not getting. There's something that I feel like I want that I'm not getting. And so by looking at that jealousy, by being like, I am jealous, and sit with that discomfort. By sitting with that discomfort and asking the question, why? What am I actually feeling? What made me jealous? Like, what about this makes me jealous? I'm going to give an example. So if you see a picture of your partner with another partner, then seeing that picture makes you jealous. You're fearing something. What are you afraid of? Or you're either fearing something or you're wanting something, or both. What are you afraid of? What do you want? And then once you answer that question, you can find it. You can go get it. So, for example, if the answer to that question is, oh, they're sitting so close and holding each other, and that looks so sweet, and they look like they're having so much fun, I really want to have more fun with my partner. then you can plan fun things to do with your partner. And if it's oh, look at the way that they're looking at each other, isn't that so sweet? I want more sentimental stuff. You can plan more sentimental stuff with your partner. If it's I want to have other partners. I am envious because my partner's having so much success finding other partners. I want that. Well, then you can go out on your own and date more. And then sometimes just realizing that really helps. But I like that it lets you set an action plan. And I would encourage managing your jealousy on your own. But to the extent you can, without putting that on your partner to solve, some transparency about what you feel like you need, and it helps you get your needs met. Talking about what you need helps you get your needs met. And jealousy is often, if you're ignoring your needs, jealousy will pop up and say, stop ignoring me. You need to look at this, and this is what you need to find for yourself. And I appreciate it when my brain gives me those roadmaps, even if it is a little bit of a punch in the emotional gut sometimes to get them. So yeah, manage your jealousy yourself, but learn from your jealousy. So much to teach. And I also always think therapy helps with everything. So also therapy, but yeah, lean into the darkness. Be okay with the idea that it might not work out. Be okay with your jealousy. Sit with your pain. And it really helps. It really helps a lot to sit with your pain. So I would like to thank the person who asked this question. They happen to be a friend of mine, and I really appreciate the thoughtful, considerate place it came from. I've tried to answer in a way that's not specific to that person, but that also I think gets at the core of the challenge that happens when folks are moving into this, and the core of what was motivating that question for this individual, because it is really important and it's really hard, and I think that we all find our own paths. So I am no longer looking in the comments for communicating with me about questions, but I do still think some dialogue is great. So if you feel like doing some dialogue, I'd encourage you to put in the comments any tips that you have. There's so many people who've done this in so many different ways. If you successfully opened up a monogamous relationship, please share your thoughts either by emailing me at kinkyqueerslut@gmail.com or by posting your comments. And as always, if you do have any questions for me that you'd like me to address on this little show, please email them to me at kinkyqueerslut@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. This is Leela, the proud Poly Kinky Queer Slut. Have a great day.